here with one of the pioneers, not only of mountain biking for me, but the pioneers of the show. Back when only 2 or 3 builders were hand building bikes, and now we have, look at the show. So Tom, tell us about your roots, how it got going. 40 years seems to be the theme this year. It's been quite a while.
Yeah. You know, all I can say is that you know, I grew up in a very unique environment. Sacramento is very close to where I live. It's in the Silicon Valley. Back then, it wasn't called the Silicon Valley. It was just,
there was no silicon.
Yeah. I mean, they were working on it. But my dad was an engineer, and he brought us out from New Jersey in 1963, and I ended up really wonderfully falling into an environment of creative people, and that basically, you know, to build a bike at 15 years old, it wasn't like a weird idea.
Wow.
It's like, hey Dad, I want to build a bike, and would you help me? And he goes, yeah, let's build a bike. So there was, you know, there was a time when there was no one to teach you. There was nothing to learn from.
Nothing to learn from.
There was
no book, no internet.
No book, no nothing. And it was a matter of basically just hear the materials and figuring out what the best way to do it was, and then racing it, then taking it, being my own guinea pig and racing it, and building my kind of success in terms of building the next bike and racing it, and people seeing me win and then wanting one, and then playing with components and building a stem, building a seat post. I did all this between the age of 15 and 17.
Wow.
And it wasn't a big deal. You know, it was just what I was thinking about and creating, and you know, the way that the industry has grown up around people like me and others in that time period is amazing, because there was 2 things that really changed cycling, and that was when Greg LeMond came on the scene. In '76, I was just starting to wind out of racing, and Greg came on then, won the Junior World Championships, got the first pro contract in Europe, and basically took American bikes. He was riding an American bike. And he took that and kind of showcased it to the world in his racing, like I showcased my bike to my smaller world. And it was that took on the spotlight of the world, and from that, the mountain bike was in its beginning point. Okay, so those years, 77, 78, Greg was coming on. Mountain bike was just starting to happen. The interest of both Greg taking cycling from America and showing it to the world, and us taking a new technology and showing it to the world, happened simultaneously.
Wow.
And to me, that's really why mountain bikes reach such a quick, you know, engagement in the market. I went from building almost 1,000 bikes before I built my first mountain bike. That I never had anyone from Europe or anyone asking to buy one. From when I built my first mountain bike, asking, you know, Cinelli wanted one.
So that was a big inflection point.
DeRosa wanted one. I mean, it was the first time a European master
was asking
wanted an American for you know, one of their bikes.
That's true. So we had a builder, and we had mountain bikes, and now who would have thought there would be demand from the great masters?
And that was a tipping point.
The tipping point.
And I saw that being a tipping point, and I saw other things in my life being tipping points. And you know, all I can say is that people like to simplify the story. People like to simplify and say mountain bikes, they came from motorcycles, or mountain bikes, they came because a bunch of guys in Marin, you know, were playing around with, you know, a cruiser bike. It's much more of an interesting story to really look at the history and the timing of all these things,
right,
and the other things that were going on,
right,
that got people's attention to focus on something.
Right. It's like a perfect storm.
Yeah.
Many things have to happen.
Yeah.
For this to really catch on. It's not a light bulb moment.
Yeah, I mean, Greg riding on an American product, racing on an American product, insisting that he had a time trial bar made by
what product was that?
Boone Lennon's, the time trial position.
Ah, right.
Oak, I mean, those were American innovations.
Those are American innovations and craftsmanship, huh?
Yeah, and those things.
And getting laughed at before he won.
Yeah.
Like, what is that?
And same thing with me. I built my first mountain bike, and since I had built so many road bikes and done so well, I had all these people like scratching their head. Ritchey, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, it was just like a joke, you know. That first bike over there was just like, what? This is like, why are you doing this? You know, keep building bikes.
Keep building what you know.
Yeah.
So, but thankfully you weren't discouraged, and you kept building. What are the big changes you see now as we're in this room packed with people appreciating the art? What are some of the highlights for you?
Well, first of all, the things that this room says to me is that the artisan, the craft is alive and well. And you couldn't say that 5 years ago.
Right.
You really
hard to make a living.
Yeah, hard to make a living, and the idea that you could build from steel, titanium, carbon fiber, aluminum in a custom way.
Right.
And people, you know, look at each one of the materials and value them was really hard to say.
Right.
You know, steel's kind of reeminence is really important to me because as an engineer, what a material does is very critical. And yes, aluminum makes great rims and makes great forged parts and things like that.
Right.
But when it comes to a bicycle frame, there's very few materials that eclipse steel.
Right.
That you can basically the narrow mind of an engineer looks at materials and says how much work this material does in a certain space.
Right.
If you have tons of space, you can choose carbon fiber and aluminum.
Right.
But if you have a very narrow space, like a chainstay of a bicycle, or a seat stay, or a tube here, if you have a narrow space or a fork plate, you look at materials very uniquely.
Right.
And steel does things that very few materials can duplicate.
Right.
And it's good to see steel being appreciated and valued, and it's easier to really kind of highlight a person's skill and their craft and differentiate it from others with steel. And I love seeing that come back and the artisan come back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
On that note, tell us about the 40 years and tell us about this bike.
Well, there's a lot of pieces to this bike that aren't obvious, but one of the things that I'm trying to do as a builder is I'm trying to make the front end really strong, and it's very subtle here. It's hard to see, but this is actually a 1-inch head tube.
Wow!
But it uses an 1 1/8 fork and an 1 1/8 drop-in bearing.
Right.
This tube being 1 inch and not 1 1/8 makes this tube a lot stronger in a bending moment. Okay, and it's not rocket science, but it's escaped a lot of people that you can actually build a better front end with making a 1-inch tube with an
smaller
inch.
tube.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my God!
So that's the heart of this bike, is the integrated headset.
Why is that? The structure is tighter?
The structure is stronger and tighter. Anytime, I mean, if you take a beer can and you push your thumb into it, it's easy to crush.
Right.
So the bigger this tube gets in steel, the easier it is to crush. And a head tube of a bike is very susceptible to crushing.
Right.
And so it's just, it's just physics, it's just mechanical engineering. The other things just have to do with correct geometry. Very subtle things like an ovalized C-tube.
It's ovalized.
Very subtle, things that have to do with a longer slot for clamping a carbon seat post. There's things that you learn, that you see other builders not pay attention to over years. And since I didn't make a lot of bikes for a long period of time, I mean, I made some, but not a lot. There's been this pent-up desire that I know something.
You know works.
I know what works, and I want to do it.
Right.
And so basically, this bike is a consequence of having this pent-up, 15-year desire to finally, bring these things into fruition.
Right. Get it out there. And he's never stopped riding. I see Tom all the time on Page Mill or Skyline Boulevard. Just like a motor. It keeps going. So the experience keeps building, in the passion.
Well, that's the other thing is that a lot of times I ride alone, and the value to riding alone is that you don't really have any backup.
Right.
And I go off-road on my road bike. I take, all kinds of chances, and I learned at a very young age that you build stuff that works, that you don't have, and you're self-sufficient.
Right.
You carry your pump, you carry your spare, and you think about it. You think about what you're riding in the environment you're riding, so that you don't have to be stranded.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of been my mindset all along.